Ladies and gentlemen, I take classes at GD, and I have a public speaking class that I have to for, and I need 12 people to watch me doing. So I hope you don't mind if you, whatever you're doing, you can just go back to it. We're just gonna pan over you real quick, and
It's too late.
Hope you don't get too confused by my ramblings. Okay.
We've panned. It's too late.
Are we ready?
Yeah, go for
You
it.
ready? Are you filming?
Yep,
Okay, let's do this. Did you do a quick little pan?
I did.
Okay. I think it's safe to assume that most of us have knowledge of college sports. Whether or not you cheer for your alma mater, or maybe your parents' alma mater, maybe even played college sports yourself. We all at least have a general idea of college sports in our country. College athletes should be considered professional players, and they also deserve to be paid like ones. If you give me just a few minutes of your time to explain why I think college athletes should be paid like professional players. The popularity of college sports has certainly skyrocketed the profit that you can make being involved in this industry. Aside from the athletes themselves, high-ranking personnel like coaches, promoters, even advertisers, they rank in the cash. Meanwhile, the students' compensation is usually a free or nearly free education. Organizations like the NCAA get to make branding deals, merchandising deals, all based on their students' likeness, meanwhile not ever compensating the student. Student athletes actually work pretty much a full-time job. They have to worry about their GPA, and they always have the thought of a career-ending injury hanging over them. Americans have always appreciated good sportsmanship. I mean, who doesn't love a good basketball game? March Madness just ended about a month ago, and I'm sure we all have a favorite SEC college football team. Tiger Beat! College sports are part of the identity of America. Kids even play virtual versions, stay inside all day and play virtual versions of these college sports. The general public, therefore, should support paying athletes, kids that they've been watching for 4 to 5 years grow and evolve and get better at their sport. And they buy their jerseys and their merchandise and their tickets. I'm quite sure that the fans would be supportive of the money they spend going towards these athletes. These athletes that invest so much time, so much effort, they sacrifice only for it all to be taken away with a career-ending injury. College sports programs do not have a safety net in place for injured players. If they get injured during practice or during a game, and it's an injury that isn't going to recover quickly, you would think they would have a safety net in place, especially for students who can't afford tuition without those scholarships. However, no, they are dropped from their team and they are dropped from their scholarship. One wrong move and a student athlete can lose everything. And their free education might not actually be all that it's cracked up to be. A 2014 scandal is a great example of this. The University of Northern Carolina was enrolling students in what they called paper classes. They were classes that pretty much never or very rarely met up, and they usually only had one final paper to do as an assignment. If one school got caught doing this, it's probably safe to assume that multiple schools are either, if not pulling the same scheme, then a very similar scheme. Some students spend all of their time and effort to be the best for their team, and they might not even get a quality education out of it. With these student athletes being duped with an underwhelming education, higher-ups in their organizations are making money hand over fist. For example, the SEC raked in over $500 million in revenue last year, while the NCAA a record-breaking $1 billion in revenue last year. They have the money to pay these students that are meanwhile struggling to either afford tuition, and in the future they'll likely have trouble paying their bills, because only 1% of college athletes actually end up going pro. Most rely on their degree to provide job opportunities, and hopefully some upward mobility through the lower and middle classes. It can be difficult to gain that degree when they're practicing 30 to 40 hours a week, which most basketball players, football players, really popular sports are doing those practicing hours. Graduation isn't even actually guaranteed. College athletes graduate at a much lower rate than normal students. For example, men's Division I basketball students tend to graduate at a 23% lower rate than normal college students. College programs get to use their athletes and then toss them out into the world, likely in a less advantageous position than they were when they even arrived. Of course, not everything is so black and white. Someone will have to figure out how much these athletes actually deserve to be paid, because not all of college sports are actually equal. For every juggernaut like basketball or football, there's a less popular program like maybe fencing or swimming. Athletes will have to be paid at different rates according to the effort invested and the popularity of the sport itself. Less practice hours might not reap the rewards that long ones do, and likewise, students playing sports that generate more revenue will likely be practicing longer, making the pay differences acceptable. Not everyone thinks, of course, that student athletes actually deserve to be paid. However, most who seem to oppose it are the ones who are profiting heavily off of their students. The NCAA stated that it wished to keep players at an amateur or unpaid status so as not to detract from their schoolwork. That makes sense. With time taken up by branding and merchandising deals, students might have a hard time focusing on their studies if they weren't already spending 30 to 40 hours a week in practice. They already spend so much time focusing on their sport that it is distracting from their studies. And if their studies include classes like those paper classes mentioned earlier, obviously these schools don't actually care as much about their students' educations as they would have you believe. In conclusion, it is doubtful whether or not anyone could actually prove that student athletes don't work hard enough to be paid for their efforts. Their schools are allowed to make millions selling their images and reputations, while these students are banned from making a single penny off of themselves, and they have to worry about things like career-ending injuries taking away those good opportunities that they're hopefully investing in their future. Their dedication and long hours practicing prove that they deserve to be compensated for their time. That is it. Thank you very much for paying attention and for giving me your time. It's very much appreciated. Please, yeah, just go back to whatever it is.